Liz Truss, who's actually prime minister, she used to be a Republican, but has now claimed to be a lover of the monarchy. Yeah.
Love of the monarchy. Okay. And obviously, as you mentioned, Republicans in the English context is very different. Can someone explain to me why Truss became the way she is politically? Also, how she compares to Boris Johnson, and what the British didn't like about Boris Johnson, because it's obviously not his conservative politics.
Liz Truss had to replace Boris Johnson, who had to resign because of the numerous scandals he'd been through. I mean, obviously, you've heard of parties that went on under his watch in Parliament, and Truss was the actual former Foreign Secretary. And I think you're right to say in her youth she was an abolitionist, so she's since changed her views, and she also used to be a Remainer in the Brexit debate, and then she changed her mind. Then she was a former Liberal Democrat, and it's quite amazing that both the leader of the Tories and the leader of our party, the Labour Party, were also both abolitionists in their student years, but are now pretty much part of the establishment. And this Liz Truss is a new leader who nobody knows really who the real Liz Truss is, and it's probably at a time when we have a real dearth of talent in British politics, in front row British politics, where people like Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and even our own leader Keir Starmer, people accuse them of not believing in what they stand for, and they like shape shift into whatever a popular view is or whatever benefits their individual career path. But we're fearful in England that we've got a new leader who we're very fearful of. We feel that this is the most right-wing leader that we could hope for, with the most right-wing cabinet, and also it's at the worst possible time when we've got the worst possible leader who will make the lives of people in this country even harder than it has been, coming out of 12 years of austerity, which led to 150,000 plus deaths, and then a pandemic under Boris Johnson's leadership, which led to over another 150,000. So these Tories, through their austerity measures and their handling of the pandemic, are responsible for the excess deaths of over 250,000 British people. And it's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse.
And I think it kind of tells you the state of British politics when it's not the austerity measures that made the Boris Johnson collapse. It's not the collapsing NHS that made his. It's not inflation. It's not the rising energy price. None of that stuff was what made his leadership end. What made his leadership end was because of him promoting somebody who had a alleged sexual assault claim against him. And that really tells you the state of British politics that they're in. That it's not those issues that are what we're discussing, the main things. It was just that one little which was a horrible thing to happen to that individual. But like we said, austerity has killed over 100,000 people, etc., etc. They're not the things that we're like primarily focused on. It's those other things. And then the only other thing I would add about Liz Truss is that actually she's now quoting Margaret Thatcher as if she was her role model, which is an insane perspective to do, especially at a time when we're suffering the worst inflation that there is out there. It would be like saying, Ronald Reagan's policies were so great, we need to like implement more of those in America right now. And as much as I don't think Biden is a great leader, he would never go for Ronald Reagan like type policies. And the same, but whereas Liz Truss is now saying no, she believes in those policies.
What does abolitionist mean in the British context, by the way, Mish? You referred to that.
By that I meant, in that context, I meant to abolish the monarchy. She was very anti-monarchy. She did, in her own words, she said it's disgraceful to have unelected head of state with so much wealth. It's out of date. I think you'll find these clips.
She's kind of like a Kristen Sinema. I don't know if you guys know about Kristen Sinema, but she used to be a progressive. She was in the Green Party, and now she's probably one of the most right-wing Democrats in Congress. She famously voted against raising the minimum wage by going like this, and it was a terrible moment.
I think the danger with these people that don't have any politics is that they adopt whatever policy that they think the audience will like. And I think the most important thing is she was chosen not to be the leader of our country, not by the people of the country. She's chosen by 81,000 members of the Conservative Party, who are mainly rich, white, middle-class men, mainly. And because she's such an extremely right-wing neoliberal, who believes in a tiny state, and she's cutting. All she's talking about now is cutting taxes for the rich and more privatization. And just at the time we need the opposite. It's the most right wing leader we can hope for. And I mean, what we fear that it's gone from proto-fascist in Johnson to almost the extreme right wing now.
Yeah, and she's excited about using nuclear weapons. I saw when she was asked about that.
I mean, that's like Hollywood stuff, isn't it? Using nuclear weapons. What's going to be really damaging to us is that she wants to overturn any regulation that protects workers. She wants to take away workers' rights to collectively bargain. She wants to take away trade unions' rights to strike. She wants to get rid of any protection that workers have in terms of wanting to. I mean, workforce in the UK is already overworked and underpaid, and she wants to remove protection to wages, remove any chance of reasonable wages, and also any decent terms and conditions. It's just people already down to their bare bones, and she's about to take us back to the dark ages. And I'm not really exaggerating. This is what's happened. We've got energy bills which are so out of control. They've already more than doubled over the last 12 months, are on the verge of quadrupling, and that's going to put millions and millions of people into pure poverty. And we're not talking the most extreme poor people. We're talking ordinary people. There's campaigns called "Don't Pay." I mean, really, people can't pay. They just can't afford to.
Yeah, I think the issue is when we're measuring economic growth, and this is both sides of the Atlantic. Usually, like economic growth is measured by things like GDP or stock price or how the stock market is doing and things like that. But that doesn't really measure true economic value, because when we look at wealth inequality, that's increased exponentially compared to how the GDP has improved. So yes, although on paper it might look like that, America's economy has grown or Britain's economy has grown, the reality is that the wealth inequality has tarnished big time. So although a few people may be, flying their private jets, there are some people who are literally living, and winter's coming up, will be dying of cold weather.
It sounds like the opposition to Johnson is more like the Israeli opposition to Netanyahu, which was not about his policies, but just about particular scandals and corruption.
Yeah.
So that's it. And it was scary in Israel. It's scary in England. Any final words that you guys wanted to share, or comments or thoughts? Would love to have you guys back on again, by the way.
I think just before I go, I think it's important because of the context. This is a US mainly, as in your audience is mainly US, but I'm sure it's worldwide. But I think the fact that our NHS is also the fear is that it's at risk, because obviously the NHS, the National Health Service, is our pride, it's our greatest asset, and it's because it's free to use at the point of need, something that you, our brothers and sisters across the pond, probably don't get. These Tories, and especially under Liz Truss, they just hate it because they don't need it. They all have private healthcare, and we are so dependent on it. And because, as I said before, the 170,000 or so Conservatives, who are mainly white, mainly male, mainly live in rural countries, and they elected Truss, they don't see the reasons why their taxes should pay for a service that benefits 60 million other people who really need it. And they've been trying to privatize it for years. And I think we need some solidarity from across the pond, from people, because most of the companies that are going to be privatizing will be American-backed healthcare companies. And I think we need some kind of leverage from both sides of the pond to make sure that doesn't happen. So I think that's what I'd like to push before I leave you to it.